Happy Sunday, everybody. How is everybody doing? Fantastic, actually. That's awesome, Miss Angela. I wish you the best of luck in that in making that transition from the associates to the bachelors. Fantastic news, actually. So for class this week, is there anything that I can do to help clear up some of those things that will make that transition even easier in the world of Max? Okay, we can actually take a look at unwrapping. It's actually a really good one to look at. Let me excuse me, let me get some images here for us to use for our unwrap. Let me unlock my drive. All right. Give me 1 second here. Gonna look for some images for us to work with for tonight. And so, what I'm gonna use in here, I don't know how many people around have seen the movie Hellraiser. Um, but it's probably one of my favorite horror movies of all time. And in that vein, we'll make a Hellraiser box with just texture. Actually, pretty simple thing to do. And let's just go. One thing I did was I googled just googling some images. Um, and what's really cool is that this can actually help us with laying out our tiles to do inside of either Photoshop or something of that sort. Um, excuse me. So if you look at some of these, the ones at the top, I've got a couple in here that'll probably work just fine. At least I think so. This one here might work. And the one I'm really in particular looking at is probably this one. I think this one would work more. Oh, there's some really cool ones. Oh, yeah. Here's a good one. This one's really good because it's so large. When you're looking for textures to use, the larger you can get them, the better off you are. And this one's actually okay. And I can make some changes to this one relatively easy. I kind of wanted one that was more of just black and white, but we can make changes to it without much of an issue. So let's just save this image. So let's save this image. I'm going to save it. And what you want to make sure you always do when you're working with these images, before I save this, when you're working inside of Max, you want to make sure that you always set yourself up a project folder. So I'm going to set a project folder in here. And I'm going to set it to the desktop. I'm going to make a new folder. And I'm going to call this Hellraiser underscore box. Now, a lot of times you'll see me save, I'll save files and things of that nature, and I'll always call it underscore. I don't leave spaces. And I'll tell you where that comes from. For me, I've worked in a pretty much Unix environment. So I've worked on more computers that are not Windows, they're not OS X like a Macintosh, but they're PCs where they just run a special operating system. And most film companies use Linux or a Unix-based operating system. And you can definitely do a search for Unix or Linux for operating systems. And 3D Studio Max does not run on a Unix or Linux operating system, but Maya does. Maya is completely native to a Linux or Unix environment. And the advantage of that is that one, with Windows, a lot of times you end up with this really huge bottleneck from the operating system. And, if you've ever used Windows for an extended period of time, you know that a lot of times Windows will start to slow down for no apparent reason and just give really, really bad performance when you don't want it to. So anyway, back to the spaces, and the reason why I don't use spaces is that Linux and Unix environments do not really like just a space, because even though you don't see anything between like two words in a document, that still takes up a bit of memory when you're typing. So those programs, those operating systems like it when you give it a something to go in between there, like a real character. So that's why I never type spaces. I actually just type in an underscore for a space. Makes it work well. So here I have my box, and I'm going to change this from realistic to shaded because I don't like the whole way that the realistic view looks on this. It keeps trying to render it when I don't want it to do that. So let's look at my box. Let's take my box and let's go in here and, excuse me, I'm going to convert this to an editable poly. And as usual, I can see now I have polygons in here. So let's change the color of this box so we can see our polygons a lot better. So I'm going to make my box, let's do like this off. So when I click on this, you can see there's my individual polygons. Now, something you have to understand. When you're looking at your three-dimensional object, you're looking at it and it's like, okay, that's great, but how do you get images onto this three-dimensional object? Well, inside of regular, internet, inside in sort of regular just space in 3D, you have what we call your Cartesian coordinates, and your Cartesian coordinates come from your x, y, and your z value, right? And so your excuse me, when you're looking at this, you're actually looking at your object in 3D space, which is great, works well. But what about when you want to lay this thing down? How do you know um, what side of your box you're going to apply your texture to? And that's part of what we're doing this week in class, right? You guys are applying your texture to your object so that we can see, images mapped onto it. Well, we need a way that we can actually take this three-dimensional object and lay it down so that we have a more two-dimensional object so we can see it in 2D texture space. Now, one of the big things to remember is when we talk about three-dimensional space, we talk about X, Y, and Z. When we're talking about two-dimensional space, we're actually talking about U, V, and W. And the best way to remember these guys is to know that your UVW actually corresponds to X, Y, and Z. So your X is U, right? Your V is Y, and your W is Z. And instead of it being depth, because in 3D, the Z is your depth, like how far something is into your scene. In UV space, or UVW space, the Z coordinate translates into rotation. So you still have U, which is your left and right. You have V, which is up and down, and then you have W, which is rotational value, because you can rotate something at a different value inside of 3D. So that's what the UVW and XYZ kind of correspond to. Now, there's a rule of thought, and I'm going to show you how we can lay this guy out in two-dimensional form. So what I want to do is, I've got my box in here, and I'm going to change the name of this because you always want to make sure you name your things inside of Max Hellraiser box. So I've got my box in here. I'm going to drop another modifier on this, and the modifier that I'm going to drop on this is my Unwrap UVW. Now my Unwrap UVW, you'll see it gives me these green lines that are all over my model right now. So I got all these green marks all over it, which are fine. These are what we call UV borders. So each polygon is basically like this little UV island. So the polygon itself is known as a UV island. And instead of calling, like we normally, when we click on these guys here, we normally call these vertexes, but when you're working in two-dimensional space with your UVs, these are no longer vertexes, these are now UVs. They correlate to the same exact space as your vertices, right? So just know that. The sad part about it is they tried to separate 3D space from 2D space by giving it a different set of alphanumeric values, but I think sometimes it just makes it more confusing because really you're talking about the same object, except you're talking about it in 2 dimensions as opposed to 3 dimensions. Does that make sense so far for everybody? I want to make sure that you guys aren't getting confused or anything, because I know it was confusing to me when I first learned it. Okay. And it'll make more sense when I actually unwrap this object. So you have to apply your unwrap UVW. And when you do that, you'll have a couple of rollouts inside of here. You have your selection rollout, projection, edit UVs, your channel, your peel, wrap, and configure. Yes, you can do this in Maya as well. The process is a little different inside of Maya. And actually what I'll do is while this is loading up, while we're working inside of Max, I'll go ahead and open up Maya. And after I show how to do this in Max, I'll just do a quick one inside of Maya. Just so that it's not so that it makes sense. So what I want to do here inside of Max is I have to apply my unwrap UVW. And I'm going to go here and say open UV editor. And when I do that, sorry about that, guys. So when I do that, you can see here's my UV editor. Now, go away, Maya. Shrink, Maya, shrink. Sorry about that. So what you'll notice is that inside of my UV editor, sorry, Maya's trying to kick up all kind of stuff back here. Close, close. Go away. We don't need you. Bye, Maya. Alright. So here inside of Max, you'll see that I have these green squares on all of my faces. But the issue is that here inside of my in my edit UVW window, I just see one big green square. Well, the problem is this, is that yes, each one of these they're in there, but they're not laid out. So right now, Maya doesn't know what it's laying out. It just threw all of my pieces in there on top of one another. Now the problem with that is that if I was trying to apply a different image to each one of my faces, I never would be able to do that because I can't see them individually. Now I can change that. I can actually come in here and do this myself. So this is the automatic unwrapping that Max did rather. And I'm going to come in here and go to polygon mode inside of my unwrap UVW. I'm in polygon mode for that. I can hold down shift and I can do something like a planar map. Now, which axis is actually up and down for, stop that, for this particular polygon? Well, if I look at it, this polygon is really facing on the Z axis because Z is up and down inside of it's top and bottom, or like I say, up and down. So when I do this, I want to click on planar mapping, and I want to make sure that it's aligned to the Z so that it kind of plops it straight down on top of that. Now I'm going to open up my UV editor, and you can see there's one big gigantic piece in here, and I want to get my move tool, and I want to actually move this off to the side. So once I have projected it, I'm going to turn off planar mapping, and now I can grab this and try to drag this over to the side. So that's the top of my box. And if I click on this right here, well, there's the other side of my box. So I can drag that off. And let's look, here's the other side of my box. I can drag this off. And this is this side of the box. I'm going to drag this guy off. And then this is like a side piece. And this is a side piece. So now you'll see inside of Max, there's no more green boxes inside of this box. The thing you have to realize with UVs as well is that your UV space basically correlates from 0, so this is 0 right here, and this is 1 over here in this corner. So 0 to 1 space. So a lot of times you will hear UVs referred to as the 0 to 1 space of your texture. So this is 0 on this corner, and this is 1 down here in this corner. So 0 to 1. So this whole space, so this whole side over here is 0, this whole side over here is 1. So 0 to 1 space. So what I'm looking at right now are all the individual pieces of my box. The cool thing is that when I click on a piece, like if I came in here now and I say this is like the front of my box right here, if I click this piece right here, I can see which piece attaches to that piece. So if I look, and if I come in here and go to edge mode, let's click on like this edge right here. Well, look at that. I can see that this edge and this edge belong to each other. So those two edges are actually the same edge. I know it's really weird, but those two edges are the same exact edge. So what I want to do inside of my edit UVs is I need to get things arranged in a certain way. So I can easily, only thing I did was I just double clicked and made my UV edit window larger. So I'm going to right click and I can say I want to go to polygon mode. So I know that this polygon belongs right here close to this polygon, like right there. And I'm going to right click and go to edge mode and click on this edge. And I can see this edge belongs to this edge. So I'm going to go back to polygon mode, grab this guy, grab him, and I can come up here. My same tools for rotate, scale, and so if I hit W, it'll give me the translate tool. If I hit E, it'll give me my rotate tool. So I'm going to rotate this, right, 90 degrees. Or instead of rotating it by hand, I'll show you. So there's my edge still up there where it was before. So instead of rotating this by hand, I'll click on this, and I can quickly rotate this by actually rotating it around with the icon right here, and it'll rotate it around the pivot point 90 degrees. So now if I come in here to edge mode, you can see the edge is lined up where the edge needs to be at. There's polygon. No. Make sure I get my move tool again, and I'll move this guy like close to right there. So let's go back to edge mode and click on this edge over here. Okay, this guy right here belongs there. So I'll go polygon, grab him, drag him up here. And I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees around the pivot positive. So now if I look at this edge mode, those two edges match up. And I'm going to, what's this one right here? That one belongs there. And I'm going to come in here and go to polygon. And whoop, whoop, move this around. Pick this up, and it goes right here. Edge, that's matched up. So the last one is this edge right here. So polygon. So once, twice. It should be in the right orientation. So let's move this up here to the top. And check the edge, and it is. So all of my pieces are now laid out in this gigantic T, and I know what pieces belong where. Because when I click on the edges, you can see where those edges belong to. You guys can use another type of texture if you want to. I'm fine with that as long as it's properly textured and everything like that. Now, the thing to think about is the cardboard texture that you're supposed to be making, it needs to have different levels of kind of grunge to it. So if you're going to do something like what I'm doing right now with the Hellraiser box, you need to make sure that you can kind of do the same thing, like layer some grunge and scratches and things like that to your box. And I'll show that kind of stuff in Photoshop when I go into Photoshop. So I've got my pieces and they're all laid out now, but they're not connected. And we know that in reality, this box is all really connected. So I can actually use my stitching. So if I came here and like clicked on this edge and I said stitch to average, you'll see those two snap together and it now has a brand new edge right there. Or I can say stitch from source and it'll stitch up, and then I can do stitch to target and it'll stitch down. The one thing that I wish that we had um, inside of Max is the ability to stitch and move, and we can't do that inside of Max, which kind of sucks, but um, we can still deal with it. So I'm gonna go to polygon mode and grab this and kind of pull this closer, like right about there. I'll come over here and grab this and pull this a little bit closer too. So I'm getting all these guys kind of lined up so that I can stitch them together. It's like stitching together a dress or something, or a shirt, or so you can see my green line's pretty thick right now. So I'm gonna go back in here and go to edge mode. I'm gonna click on that edge right there, and I'm just gonna say stitch. So I'm gonna average, and it stitches those together. And I'm gonna stitch, come here, and stitch, stitch, and stitch. Now, one of the questions you guys are probably gonna have, well, why don't I just stitch all the edges together? Well, you could, but you're back into the same boat that you were in before, where it was hard to understand where the box was actually laid out at. When you're working in UV space, you have to make sure you lay out your 3D object in the best way possible to understand what that object is in 2D space. So now that I've laid this all out, I'm going to come in here and select all my polygons, all my UVs rather. I'm going to get my scale tool, and I'm going to scale this. So you can see I'm scaling this down. I'm just going to move this back into this little box. When you're working on your UVs, when you're trying to do this and make your UVs for your object, everything has to fit inside of this little box. This one box right here, everything has to fit within this one UV tile. This is the whole thing right here is a tile. So everything has to fit inside of that 0 to 1 tile. Everything. So if you were doing a character and you had clothes and the face, the hands, the boots, if all those things are a part of the same model, they all have to fit inside of that one box, right? So just keep that in mind. Everything has to fit back inside of this one box. Now, there are ways that you can extend the size of the box, and you can actually add more tiles. But that kind of goes beyond the scope of this class, because in this class, we're really doing some basic UV editing things. But just know that as you get farther and farther along, there are ways to take that box and actually make more of them, so that you can break up things in more spaces. The advantage of that is the fact that if you have just if you had unwrapped a face, like if you unwrap a face in here, if you put just the face in this one box, that means that you'll have more area to put more texture to get a better looking face. Because think about it, if you were trying to do a whole entire body, and I actually can show you an unwrapped, like a full unwrap. Let's look at a really nice unwrapped piece. So, there it is. Nope. There we go. So if we look at this image right now that I have on screen, this is an unwrapped female or an unwrapped male. We don't really know if it's a male or female model. But this model has been completely unwrapped. And you'll see it's completely laid flat. There's the hands, the arms, the face is flat, the breasts are flat, the chest, the legs, the knees, the feet, everything is flat. Now, when they have this would be great to take into Photoshop and then start painting, the skin texture and everything else onto, our figure. And that's really how it's done, and that's how it's been done forever. So when you see an unwrapped video game character, when you see a video game character in the game, all of them have gone through the same process, and you can see all of this stuff has, been unwrapped. This has been unwrapped. all these pieces. A lot of the stuff in here is been unwrapped. So let's talk about how we can get our hell box put together. So I've got the thing unwrapped. It's unwrapped. It's great. It looks good. I'm gonna go back to the top level of my unwrap UVW. I'm gonna click on that. So now that I have that, I need to be able to get this image out of Max so that I can use it in Photoshop. So what I'm going to do is, inside of my Edit UVWs window, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to come in here and render this to UV template. Let's make sure I click on my model when doing that. The model selected. So you can see I've got my model selected. I've got my unwrap UVW selected. And one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be inside of my Edit UVW window. I'm going to right click. And at the top part of my quad menu in Tools 1, you'll see it says Render UVW Template. I'm going to click on that. And there's some things it's going to ask me. But I can honestly tell you, you don't need to touch any of these things in here except for the width and the height. The width and the height will give you the resolution of your image. So right now it's 1024 by 1024. That's a 1K image. Now if I wanted something larger, like most video games now let you use 2K images, and 2K is 2048. So I'm going to come in here and I'll say I'm going to do a 2K image. So 2048 by 2048. So I've got a 2K image. Now I'm going to say render UV template. And this is what pops out. So inside of Max, it renders me out a UV template. Now you might say, well, that looks really weird because there's gaps missing and all kind of things. The reason why there's pieces missing is because we're looking at it at half height. When you zoom out on it, it just looks kind of jumbled up. But as you zoom into it, you can see right here I'm 1-to-1. This is 100%, and at 100%, I can easily see that it basically gave me my lines and everything else. So once you've rendered your UV template, you need to still come here and say Save Image, and I'm going to save this to my desktop and go to my Hellraiser box folder and go to my scenes where all my other images are at. And I want to save this out, and I can do it as a TIFF. So I'm going to say UV underscore Hellraiser underscore box. And I'm just going to save this. So save. And it's going to ask me, do I want 8-bit color or grayscale? Well, right now I'll put this on 16-bit color because I know I'm going to use 16-bit color. I don't want compression, and I'm going to hit OK. So now this has been saved out, and I can now close this, and I can actually close my UV window and everything else. Now, this is the important thing. Once you have unwrapped your model, you can actually take this unwrap UVW and you can say you want to collapse to. And it's going to give you a warning. It's going to say, warning, collapse to. Warning, this will remove a portion of the stack of all selected objects from creation parameters to including unwrap UVW. So at this point, you're probably going to freak out. Well, don't freak out, because you can hit yes. When you do that, your unwrap UVW goes away. This is the really cool part. Once you have unwrapped your model, you can delete the unwrap UVW because the information is actually stored inside of the model itself. So once you've unwrapped something, you don't have to worry about unwrapping it again. So once you unwrap it, you can then throw away the unwrap UVW. Now, make sure, this is something that's very important, when you unwrap it, make sure you've generated a UV template like I did before. So let's go look at my UV template. So if I go and open up Photoshop, so let me go in here and go grab Photoshop. So any questions so far, guys? At least how to unwrap your pieces, how to lay them flat, how to basically render out that UV template so that you can use inside of Photoshop. Because that's really what we've done so far. Okay. Um, okay. Well, remember, Mr. Patrick, the video is always available because we did go through that, and it is always available right after we do our session. I post a link in our classrooms, and you can still see the beginning of video too. Awesome. So I'm gonna come in here and let's open. So I'm gonna come to my Hellraiser box, go to my scenes, and I'm gonna grab my UVW template, and I'm gonna grab this guy too. Grab both of these. So here inside of my UVW template, I think I need to make some changes to Photoshop here. So down to preferences. And okay, cool. All right. So there's my UVW template. Now, when you're using your template inside of Photoshop, do not, and I repeat, do not directly put anything onto this layer right here. You want to make yourself a brand new layer and just put it above it. So this Hellraiser right here, I'm just going to take this, let's drag this out, and drag this out so that I can see both of them. I'm going to come grab this layer from this right here and drop it in my other one. And it's like it's different depth. That's fine. I'm going to say yes, just do it. I can now close this and now maximize this guy so we can see it full screen. All right. So I've got my image in here. So what I want to do with this, and what I'm going to do with it, I'm going to chop this thing up into individual pieces because I want it to do what I want it to do, not just what it plans on doing. So I'm going to grab these guys. Make sure I don't get any of that white. I don't want the white to come with it. So I'm going to grab, let's just do this. I'm going to grab all of this. And I'm going to cut it. So Control X and then Control V to paste it back in. And you see it gives me a brand new layer. So it's awesome. So I can now move it out of the way unto itself. I'm going to turn that layer off for just a second. And then this guy right here, I'm going to come in here and do the same thing right here. So I'm going to Control X. Oh, make sure I'm on the right layer. Yep. Control X and then Control V. And then I can get rid of this layer 2 and just drag it to the garbage can. So now I've got all my little boxes cut out, and it was pretty quick and easy how I cut those guys out. So I'm going to turn off this one here and go back to my layer 2, and I'm going to hit Control and T to get my transform tool. And I'm just going to hold down the Shift key. I'm going to hold Shift so I scale it up proportionally. Just drag this down. Let's turn the opacity of my layer down. And let's drag this in. Just like that. And when I'm done with that, I'm going to hit the checkbox to apply it. Do the same thing for the top one. Right here, let's turn this opacity down on this layer quite a bit. Control T to transform it. Control plus minus to zoom out. Hold down Shift and drag this up to get it larger. It looks like it's almost about to be in place. Hold down shift so I can keep it proportional. And I think that's it. So snappy snaps. So everything is in there. So that looks good. So what else I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in here and turn these back to 100%. Turn this guy right here back to 100%. And I'm gonna go back to this layer 1 right here. And on layer 1, I'm gonna do a fill. I'm gonna do shift plus F5 to get my fill menu. And that's really weird. They changed my shortcut command? I believe they did. Nope, shift plus F5 is supposed to be fill, but it didn't fill. Alright. So I'm gonna use my foreground color. Just hit OK. And so I've got this filled in on my piece, and everything's sitting there. Everything's nice and neat. What I'm going to do with all of my images visible, I'm going to turn the visibility of the background layer off. I'm going to hit Control E like 2 times. When I do that, Control E basically merges one layer down to the next layer. Right? So I can do that again. I'll undo it. Right? So if you hit Control E, it'll merge down to there. And maybe I'll just leave it like that. And I'm going to change this layer right here to cross. And change this layer to background underscore color. Alright. So what I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to come in here and go File and say Save As. And let's save this out. I can save it out as a Targa. Or I can save it out as a JPEG. You really don't want to use JPEGs for images because JPEGs they're compressed. So they're really low quality. So you really don't want to use those. So I'm going to name this Hellraiser box underscore diffuse. Because I'm going to use this for my diffuse. And no compression. Leave the interleave alone. IBM, because we're on a IBM PC. And then layer compression, RLE. And just leave everything. Hit OK. It's going to tell me you're going to include layers. Well, let's cancel that. So I'll just say I want to discard layers and just let it all be. What you want to do when you're working on texture, you want to have one file, which is your working file, which is a Photoshop file. So in the end, what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to come in here and say File and say Save As. And I'm going to save this as a PSD. The PSD is going to be my large file that I continue to work with and do what I'm going to do with my image. Right? But those files that I save off, like the diffuse file, that's meant for me to actually put onto my model. Okay? So here inside of Max, let's see if all this mumbo jumbo worked and all this ninja magic is real. I think it's real. I hope it's real. So I'm going to come in here and hit M to get my material slate. I'm going to change this back to the slate editor. So I'm going to go to modes and say slate material editor. It'll reactivate the slate. We want the slate. Come on, slate. There we go. So got my slate. And I'm going to come in here. And one thing that I can see that I need to do, because I don't see any of those materials in here. I don't see any materials from Mental Ray. I want to make sure that I load up Mental Ray as my rendering engine. So I'm going to go here to render setup, like we did last week. Go to common, go all the way down to the bottom, assign renderer, come down to production, hit the little 3 dots, and I'm going to click on NVIDIA Mental Ray as my rendering engine, and then I'm going to hit OK. And they can close this. And when I do that, you can see I've got Mental Ray in there, and all this Mental Ray stuff activates. And you want to always make sure you're rendering with Mental Ray. So if things don't look right, then you're probably not rendering with Mental Ray. And if you don't see Mental Ray materials in here or shaders in here, then you don't have Mental Ray loaded. So you need to load that up. So I'm going to come in here. I'm just going to use a standard shader. I'm going to double click on it, and right here you'll see there's the diffuse that I was looking for. Now you could just come to your basic parameters and put that map into your shader, or you can come down here to where it says maps, which I find is a lot easier. And you want a diffuse map, so I'm going to click on diffuse. It says none right now. I'm going to click on none, and I need a map. So I need a map, a standard map. I want a bitmap. Now remember, all images are called bitmaps inside of Maya. That's just what Maya calls them. Alright, so it opens up and asks me for my maps. I'm going to go up, up. It's my scene. And is this my... That's not it. There it is right there. If it had been a snake, it'd have bit me. So I'm going to hit open. And then I'm going to take the output of this shader and drag it onto my box. Now, one thing you might be saying, he's like, well, it'd be really nice to be able to see this image on my box in the viewport. Well, you can do that. If you come here to the very top, you'll see there's two little checker buttons up here. This one right here says show shaded map or show shaded material in viewport. If you click on that guy, you can see that it shows me my mapping in the viewport. And you can see that just that simple, we have made ourselves a Hellraiser box. It's completely textured, got texture on it. We've got some things in here that we got to fix. We can see right here where the brown doesn't match up on the side of this. The brown doesn't match up over here. So I've got some things I have to go back and fix, and I can do that back inside of Photoshop. So if I go back into Photoshop right here and look at this, let's zoom in. And you can see with that low res image, because you can see the image that I used was kind of low quality, and when I scaled it up, it doesn't look as good anymore. It's kind of got this nasty stuff going on with it. And actually for this, I'm going to go in here and sample this color right here. I'm going to use the paint bucket just to make my background color the same color overall. And that'll fix some of those seams. But now for this image, I'm going to go in here to filters and get my blur and kind of blur this out a little bit more to try to fix it. That's not bad. Got rid of some of those jaggies that we had in there. So now I'm going to go back and save as, and we're going to still save it as a TIFF. And I'm just going to overwrite my last file. So there's my old file. It says, yes, I know it already exists. Yes, discard layers, and okay. And I'll go back into Max. And you can already see inside of Max that it has updated my material. So if I were to go back inside of Photoshop, and let's say I get like my text tool and make a new layer, and this is awesome. Come back in here and just put this where I want it. So this is awesome. Put it right there. Come back here again, save as. Make sure I save it as the same file, right? And save on top of the old file. So I'm going to save this. Yes, I'm going to replace it. No. This. And then go back into Max. And haha, this is awesome. Dun, 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 dun. The end. And when I go render this, and I actually render this out, you'll see it renders, and it renders quite well. Like the viewport still shows it a little, kind of blurry, but when I render this, you can see it renders it as well as your texture looks. So if your texture looks good, then you can render it well, right? So realistically, that is unwrapping and texture mapping in a nutshell. And I know I've really made it seem very juvenile in the way that it's done. But once you learn these techniques and you can layer different images on top of each other inside of Photoshop, you can get some really good results. Now there's 3D programs that you can paint on your objects directly onto your objects. Those are great. I use those on a daily basis pretty much. But you can still just use Photoshop and be able to manipulate your object. Like it doesn't have to be that hard. Um, and you can add multiple textures and layer stuff and everything else. Any questions so far? So what I'll do is we'll do the same thing really quick. I know Miss Kelly was asking about it. I'll do the same thing really quick inside of Maya. So just close some things. Hold on, don't want that. And I don't need this either. I don't need the rangefinder or time slider. So I'm gonna make a box here inside of Maya for us, Miss Kelly. And everybody else is gonna be, if you guys have, like, and I've told you guys, if you have not used um, Maya, it's not really that different of a program. Both of them still work in 3D. It's still kind of the same things. It's not that big of a difference. Um, so what I'm going to do here inside of Maya is I'm going to split my view and do a 2 view inside of Maya. Let me get rid of this pane over here and get rid of my channel box. So I'm going to do a 2 view, and I'm going to go to panels, and I'm going to say panel, and I'm going to choose my UV texture editor right there. So you can see I've got a UV texture editor, and it's already laid out there. So yes, the specular map is a whole different image. The specular map can be black, white, shades of gray, as well as color, because some as we learned in the first week, between dielectric and non-conductive materials, that some of those materials, or conductive materials rather, that conductive materials can have a color in the specular. They will bounce back a color sometimes, so you can put color in your specularity channel. And then your opacity map, if you're going to try to do some type of opacity, would be a black, white, and shades of gray map. You cannot use color in your opacity map. You can't use color in your opacity map. Opacity maps have to be grayscale. So here inside of Maya, some things change a little bit, Miss Kelly, if you're trying to unwrap. First of all, you'll notice that our box inside of Maya, it already has a pretty nice, simple layout. One thing that Maya does from the very beginning is that Maya already makes a layout for you on your simple objects. So it knows that this is a simple box, so it just laid it out like a simple box. And if I look at this, you can see inside of Maya I have what's called marking menus. So I can right click on this box. I can go to vertex mode, edge mode, UV mode, or face mode. If I click on UV, you can see I can click on the little UVs here, and my UVs show up inside of my viewport over here of where they belong to. Right? Not that big of a deal. So to do your unwrapping in here, you have to make sure that you're in polygon mode. So make sure you're in polygon set, and you'll see it says create UVs. And you've got the same things, like you have planar mapping, cylindrical mapping, spherical, automatic mapping. Automatic does a really good job of breaking stuff up into small pieces, but it doesn't do a good job of laying them out. It just kind of breaks them up and says, hey, here you go. So here inside of Maya, instead of just clicking on planar mapping, I'm going to click on the option box, And one thing that's really nice in here is that I can use my camera to to tell Maya what axis to basically shoot the projection from. Because you can see inside of Maya, the Y is up. So if I go here and say Y and say apply, you'll see there is my UVW. So when I go inside my UVW window, it lets me drag out that one shape. Kind of the same way that I did inside of Max, I can drag that one shape out. Let me zoom back into my model over here. And I'm going to make this the other view. So for this one, I'm going to shoot it on Z. And then there's that one right there. And then the next one, let's shoot this one on X. And say apply. Oh, wait a minute, not X, but Y. Apply. And you'll see inside of Maya, it gives you like this little cage around your stuff, which is a little bit simpler than Max does it, but it's the same premise. And this one, I'm going to shoot this one on, looks like that's going to be on Z. And it lays flat and you can see it. I'm going to drag this piece out. The thing you have to remember when you're unwrapping something, as you grab the individual pieces that you unwrap, if you're going to unwrap piece by piece by piece, as you grab those pieces, you want to make sure that you're dragging them outside of the UV space so that they're not overlapping each other when you go to manipulate them a little bit later. So now if I right click on this and say select, you can see all of my pieces of my cube are actually laid out, they're unwrapped, they're just laying around in there in pieces. So if I go in here and go to face mode, I can see that right here is that face. That's the guy that I'm looking for right here. Right? One thing that I really do like about Maya and the way that it does one thing inside of your UV editor is right here you actually have, let me drag this over, you actually have a button that lets you see a shaded view of your polygons or your UVs. When you do that, you can actually see where all of your UVs are at, for one. But the other thing is that it lets you know if they're flipped over the wrong way. Like the ones that are red right now, these guys are flipped over the wrong way. Like these guys are flipped the wrong way. So, and there's no way to tell inside of Max. But these guys are flipped over, and I can come in here and right click on these guys, and I can actually flip them, and now they're flipped the right way. So right click, polygons, and flip. I can look and see which one's the top of the box, and I think we're thinking that's the top of the box right there. And I'm just gonna go. The thing that I don't like is that you have to convert these. So I've got convert like selection to UVs, and now I can move it. So unlike inside of Max where you could just freely move the polygon and it didn't care, inside of Maya you have to be in UV mode for it to move your UVs around. But some things still work the same. Like if I click on edge, you'll see it still shows me that edge right there. This is this edge. So I'm going to come here to UV, pull it up here. I've still got a rotation tool. I still can rotate with this in here. I could come here and go to polygon, and I could very well, rotate it around or whatever I needed to do to this guy. So I can come here and rotate this. But the cool thing is that it lets me choose how to rotate it. So I could do it like 180 and say apply. And so now when I look at the edge of this, the edge is already lined up. So let's see, this right here, this right click UV mode here. This guy goes over here. Right, and edge mode, click this guy. This guy belongs over that side. So let's go UV and grab these UVs and move this guy over here. and UV again, and well, actually, let's go to edge first and see. That guy belongs up there, but what belongs down here? Okay, that belongs down there, and that's great. So I'll just drag this right here, and let's do rotate this and edge mode, and they're lined up. So very similar process. One of the things that I do actually like better about Maya's tools for unwrapping comes in this set right here. So if I go here and say polygon, instead of stitching like you stitch inside of Max, inside of here you do sew. So you can see right here I can sew UV edges, or I can move and sew them. When I do move and sew, you'll see it actually moves my piece and they just snap together. That's awesome. I like that because it ends up being a very uniform um, unwrap. But the same thing applies. I have to get it all, grab it, scale it all down, and get it to fit inside of this space right here. So if it's inside of this space, get my scale tool, scale it up, and then that's it. The thing that's different inside of here is when I go to render this, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to say polygon and say UV snapshot. And I can say I want it to be 2K, so 2048. And I'll type it in one time because keep aspect ratio is on. So when I do that, it just does the other one. I'm going to browse and output this somewhere so that I know where it's going. Let's do this to the desktop. And let's call this box underscore UV and save. And you have to make sure you choose the image format. So I'm going to say image format. I'm going to save this as a TIFF. That's what we used last time, right? I'm going to anti-alias the lines. You can see it says UV range options. UV range, normal, 0 to 1. Same thing we talked about. This is the 0 to 1 space, right? So you can, the thing that they show that's even kind of cool inside of Maya is that it'll show you. Down here is 0, over here is 1. So this is 0 to 1. This whole space is 0 to 1 space. Alright, so to save my snapshot, I just have to hit OK. Well, make sure that I select my object though. So select my object and then just hit OK. When you have your object selected and you hit OK, basically what it does is it drops you out a UV snapshot. And you can see there it is. I can open it up inside of Photoshop the same way. So I'll go in here and say open. Let's go to desktop. And there it is. Gives me the same type of result, pretty much. It's not really anything different. Realistically, if I wanted to, I probably could use the same image, the same texture on it. Like I really could. So I could come in here and just drag this guy out. Let's grab this cross and drag it over here. Oh, you behave. Oh, I'm in quick mask mode. How to do that? So grab this guy. Just grab this and drag this over there. Yes, I know it's different. But you can see it's almost the same exact thing that I made inside of that I made from before. So honestly, a box is a box is a box, right? So it doesn't really matter. I'll just make a brand new layer in here, put this behind my cross, and I'm gonna sample the color, get my paint bucket, and just drop it on this layer. There it is. Save file, save as, and let's do this one as box diffuse. Save it, discard, okay. And then back here inside of Maya, I'm gonna use the texturing inside of Maya to apply this really quick. This little guy right here. So I'm gonna open up my hypershade. So I'm gonna say window and get my hypershade. Hypershade. Let's give it a second. surprised that Maya is even still. I'm surprised Maya and Max have not tried to kill each other because they're both open at the same time. So my Hypershade opened off on my second window, on my second monitor rather. So here inside of Hypershade, I'm gonna make a brand new shader. So I'm just gonna make a Maya shader, and I'll make like a blend, and I'm gonna middle mouse, click, hold, and drag that onto my box and drop it so it's on my box. Let's hit Control A so we can see the settings for this, and you can see when I change the color of that it actually is the color of it. And for the color node, for my color node in here, so right here for my node, I'm going to click on my color node, and I'm going to click on File, and you'll see File Name. I'm going to hit the little box right here, go to Desktop, and let's say the diffuse right here is going to be what I'm going to use, and hit Open. Oh, that's right. Mine doesn't like that file format. Something with the file format of the newer TIFF files. So I'm going to save another file. So save. And save it as a targa. And let's just call this diffuse. Save it. Save a 24-bit. If you're saving out targas, make them 24-bit. 24-bit is full color. 32-bit is full color plus alpha channel. And I don't want any alpha in this. I just want color. So back to Maya. Close the output window. So back inside here to Maya. So I'm just going to change this file. Let's go change this. Desktop. There's my targa. Open. And you can see. There it is. Same type of box. Same thing. It's unwrapped. It has been unwrapped in minutes. You know, it doesn't take that long to really do. When I come in here and render this, let's make sure what I'm rendering with. Let's render with Mental Ray. And you can even see Maya and Max, they both have Mental Ray. So if I come in here and render this, bloop, and I have to give it a second because my part of the thing that happens when I'm doing stuff for you guys is that when I'm working on my own stuff, like I have 3 monitors set up, so when I go to click something to render, it pops up on another monitor. That's why it's always like, well, I don't see anything. It pops up on another monitor, so I have to end up dragging it back for you guys to see it. But you can see it took 12 seconds, rendered it out. It's pretty clean, sitting there. Took 2 seconds. So, you know, the same thing. The thing about it is, once you learn how to do it in one thing I will say that I do like that Maya does. Well, I know I like a lot of things that Maya does over Max, but one of the things that I love is that once you've rendered something and the textures have been loaded up into your video card's memory, then your renders get faster. So the first time I rendered this, it took 12 seconds. Every time when I render this now, it only takes 2 seconds to render, which is, I really love that. I think that's awesome. I wish Max would actually think about runtime that a little bit better. So you can see I can get really close to this and go back and bloop. Took 3 seconds because it's a little bit closer. And so, but that's one thing that I do like when Mental Ray inside of Maya has a little bit better connection to Maya, which is weird. So let's close that. And oh, is that what was going on? Huh. Looks like I had like multiple versions of Maya open. Oh well. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Get out of there. Let's go back to Max. So that is simple unwrapping. Any questions so far, guys, or any questions about homework for this week or anything else? Yeah, most of everything that I do, honestly, I'm teaching you guys Max. I've used Max for about um, 10 years, but I was using Maya before then. Maya has always been there. They used to really be bitter rivals, Maya, and it was kind of it's kind of this whole thing of like Maya versus Max, because they were two separate companies. And then one day, a larger company came and, and bought both of them. Um, so it just bought both of them and just made them. And now Autodesk owns everything. Autodesk owns Max and Maya, so it doesn't even matter anymore. Really, it's about personal preference, and some things are about functionality. Um, that's all. I don't know if it's available through the Rasmussen stuff, but I think as a student, if you just go to the Autodesk student site, if you have a valid school email, then they should give you the free version of any of their software that they give for free to students. And I know Maya is one of those programs that they will give you a 3-year license while you're in school to actually be able to use, because some of my other students at other places where I've taught at, they have gotten it through the school. Um, so, and for your question, Miss Cruz, it, this class is taught in Max, but the problem is that everybody can't get Max to run on their computers. Um, and a lot of you guys have Apple computers, and either fortunately or unfortunately, Maya runs on a Macintosh. Maya runs on Mac just fine, but Max does not. Max is a Windows only program, and that's one thing that people don't like. So what's happening with your spheres as far as them not rendering correctly? Okay. Do you have anything for them to reflect? One of the biggest problems when you're working with items that are conductive, when you're working with conductive shaders. Okay. Um, yeah, I mean we can. The other thing about it is too, is I think there's some other students that are in the materials class and they're actually using Maya. It's not a huge deal. So let's Maya it back up. Come on, Maya. Come on through, Maya. One of the things working with conductive materials, when you're sending any file to me, and I'll handle that before I even talk about the conductive materials. Um, if when you're sending files and putting them into the Dropbox for class, make sure that whether you're sending your image files or sending your Maya or Max files or AVIs or whatever you're sending, make sure that you zip it up first. Because I'll tell you that Rasmussen, I mean, it doesn't care, but the email portion of the class does not like files that are not zipped. It just doesn't. And if the file isn't zipped, it just kind of gets ticked off at it and doesn't like to download for me. So sometimes it can look like you didn't. So sometimes for me, I might send you a message and say, "Hey, can you please, just zip it?" Yeah, don't use the Max Archive zip files. They don't work well. They really don't work well. Really, the best thing to do is just to grab your file. is just to grab your file. Like if you're gonna do it, like I'll do one real quick. Like I'm gonna grab all these guys and just right click on it. If you're in Windows and just say send to, and then just choose, excuse me, just choose compress zip folder. Like that's it. Like bloop, and it'll give you a folder, and there's your folder, or your zip file rather. That's the best way to do it. On Mac, it's the same. I think Mac has a very similar function to that. Um, so, well, zips are archives. I mean, that's really what they are. They're an archive. They're an archival file. But 3D Studio Max has its own implementation of a zip file, which is not. Um, let's just say that Autodesk has chosen to do things their own way. So there's a couple of different ways you can zip things. I mean, there's actually different zip programs you can use. There's pzip, there's 7z, there's WinRAR, there's RAR files. There's all kind of archival files that you can basically compress information into. The easiest way to do it is to do it with your operating system zip um, operation. Like Windows has the basic send to little thing. Like you can right click on it and say send to, and just do a compressed zipped folder, which is an archive, um, and everything else. Yeah, WinRAR will make zip files. If you tell it to zip it instead of making a RAR file, it'll make them. Um, to me, honestly, I don't care what zip format you use, whether it's zip, WinRAR, WinAce, 7-zip, or whatever, because I use pzip, and pzip it understands all of those. It doesn't even care. Like it can unzip any type of zip file that you guys throw at me. So that's fine. It just has to be zipped up. I mean, it just needs to be compressed in one file, because it gets really hard to download like 9 different files individually. It's easier for me just to grab the archive and look at your stuff and give you feedback on it. So back to your issue in Mahaya. So one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to come in here and actually make myself a plane. So there's my plane. I'm going to view it. And no, I don't want to model on it. I'm going to make myself a sphere. Drag that guy out. Let's duplicate that sphere. Bring this guy over here. Let's duplicate him and bring him over here. So I've got my 3 spheres in here. So they're looking quite dapper today. And I'm going to go and I'm going to get my hypershade. So I'm going to go to Window, Rendering, and Hypershade. Come on back, Hypershade. There you go. So now, Miss Kelly, are you using Maya materials or Mental Ray materials? Phone. Okay. So I will use only the basic Maya material. So you can see that the Maya materials I have a blend. So you are using some of the Mental Ray materials, perhaps, maybe, or all of them are the Maya materials? Well, what I'll do for good measure is I'll use 2 Maya materials and 1 Mental Ray material. So when I'm using the Mental Ray materials, if I come down here to Mental Ray, I want to grab this MIA underscore material underscore X passes. I know it's a mouthful, right? I want to use this MIA material X passes. So I'm going to click on that guy. And I'm going to drag this onto this guy over here. Now, one thing that you'll notice is when I brought this MIA material in here, it shows up with a red dot, with a red line over the material name. Well, the reason why it does that is that if I look inside of my render settings, you'll see that I'm currently rendering using the Maya software renderer. If I click on that and change that to my mental ray renderer and close that, you'll see the red line goes away. You can only render mental ray materials inside of mental ray. Now you can render Maya materials inside of either one, but if it's a mental ray material, it has to be inside of mental ray for it to actually render, right? So let me get some things kind of set up so we can see both of these. Actually, I don't even know why I'm doing that. Stop that. I'm gonna just split my view and put my hypershade over here. So panels, gotta close hypershade first. So close hypershade. Oh, you would do that. You're acting like a little punk. I think Maya's mad because I'm inside of Max. I think she's mad at me. She's like, "How dare you cheat on me with Max?" I didn't mean it. I promise. So let's get this guy to load up, and actually let's just shut down Max while this is happening. So I'm gonna split my view, and I'm gonna put hypershade over here. So panels hypershade, so that it's already over here. And go to Maya. Let's make a blend, and let's make a Fong, and then mental ray. Let's make it X passes. And you can see again that the renderer is not loaded. I'm going to go back in here and load up mental ray, close it. Yeah, there we go. So go in here and make my polyplane. Boop. Hit 5 on the keyboard. Go back in here and make a sphere. Pull sphere up. Duplicate sphere. Pull sphere over. Duplicate sphere. Pull sphere over. So if it decides to crash on us again, I'm going to save this. Save as. And desktop. Spheres. Sphere rays. Okay. So this is going to be my blend material here. And this is going to be my Fong material here. And this will be my MIA material over here. Now if I render this, scale this up, scale. So if I render this right now, go in here and say render. Let's give it a second. So you can see that it should be able to, and you can see the rendering on each one of these. Like the reflectivity on this mental ray material is actually more physically accurate because I'm getting like this light from the light that's defaultly in my scene. And these right here, while they kind of look accurate, they're not really as accurate as this. The mental ray materials are the most physically accurate materials that you're going to find. These right here, you can actually keep working with these until you get them to look like this, but by default, this is going to be your best bet to start with. It's going to be your mental ray material because it's going to already have some of the physically accurate settings set to it. Now, if I were doing this, I could go to my Fong and hit, come over here and look at my reflectivity and turn my reflectivity of my Fong up. Like I could come in here and say, yeah, it's going to be really reflective, and come back and I'm going to keep one of these. So I'm going to keep an image and then re-render. And you can see now, this is the image that I just did. This is my old image. So this is the new image, this is the old image, and you can see this is way more reflective than this one. This one's only mildly reflective. And if I turn this all the way down, like this, I'm going to keep this guy and then render another one. You can see he's not very reflective at all. So he's just a little bit reflective. So this one's less reflective. This one's more reflective. Now, your mental ray materials can do the same thing. Like your mental ray, with your mental ray material, or shader rather, you'll see this is broken up into individual drop downs. You've got a diffuse drop down, a reflection, a refraction, advanced reflection. So if I'm doing like reflectivity inside of this one, I would just go into the reflection drop down and turn down reflection. But you've got to remember, in real life, reflection also includes the color, it includes the reflectivity of an object, as well as the glossiness of it. So I'm going to turn down the glossiness too. So it's not going to be as glossy from that. So I'm going to keep this image and then render another one. And we can see that now this guy looks really dull. So I've made it less accurate. I can turn the reflection back up and re-render this. And you can see it's got like a reflection to it, but without some kind of glossiness to it, the reflection's not going to show. So if I come up with this like right here and then re-render, you can see now I've got glossiness, and that's what makes it reflection. The thing that I do like about Maya's materials when it comes to mental ray is that you have more to be able to tweak. Now, yes, that does mean that you have more you can screw up too, but you have more control over how those materials actually work, as opposed to like my Fong here. On my Fong, I've only got like color, transparency, ambient color, incandescence, diffuse color. I mean, it's the same things, but you've got to know how to be able to, being able to use a more physically accurate material lets you really kind of think about how those things actually work in real life. You know, just like the roughness here, roughness is a really interesting value because some materials in real life have a rougher texture to them than others. So if I turn up the roughness of this, if we keep this one and I render a new one, only by turning up the roughness, you can see this is a rougher material, and it interacts with the light a different way. So this is no roughness, this has roughness on it. You can even see it's kind of not as glossy, it's kind of has that more plasticky feel to it and things like that. So, but what I will always tell any student is that when you're doing things that are reflective, if you're doing an object that's reflective, you need to have some type of image in your world for it to reflect. So I'm gonna cheat right now, and I don't know why. I guess because it's Halloween, I'm stuck on Hellraiser, right? And plus, it's an awesome movie. Um, so I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna like get a really large image. So let me get like a large image in here if I can find one, like a 6 megapixel image. Um, and I'm gonna do Hellraiser. Let's just do the boxes. It's awesome. No, I just want the image. I don't want to come to your site. Oh, it's in your site. I don't want that then. That's lame. Give me something else. There we go. There's somebody's pristine box they made. So save image. And I'm just gonna do this to desktop and save. Well, you say that, Miss Cruz, but honestly, I have students that when they first start out, they take Max, and then when they take their second classes, and not at Rasmussen, Rasmussen is Max the whole way through. But they start out in Maya. Maya has a really complicated toolkit. You've got to really get in there and be, very proactive in learning where all the things are. And the other problem with Max is the fact that you can do the same thing like 40 different ways. Um, but when they get to Maya, yeah, the first I guess month or so that they're struggling with it. But after that, the tools become seamless and they become secondary, and you don't even think about them because a lot of your tools are just there. You don't have to run around looking for your tools. As you notice, there's no command panel inside of Maya. All my tools can be found by holding down spacebar. I can get to every one of my menus that I need to get to. When I'm modeling on something, I can just right click on it and say vertex mode and just start modeling. There's no modifiers inside of Maya, as it were. So back to our background image issue, Miss Kelly. This is what you need to do, and I suggest you do it when you're working on your reflective materials. Go to your render settings, make sure you have mental ray loaded, and come in here where it says indirect lighting, and just say indirect lighting. And where it says image based lighting, click on create, and you'll notice what it makes is it makes this dome that shows up around your entire scene. So it gives you this dome around your entire scene, which is awesome. Inside of that, you'll see it says image name. Click on image name, go to desktop, and there's that image I just found, and say open. And you see that image has been mapped around the dome. So now if I come in here and I render this, you can see that it shows me that image reflected in my actual material. So that's what I like to do. I like to make sure I have an image in there of something, because when it's black, when you don't have anything in your world at all, and it's just the blackness of your 3D space, your reflection can do some weird things. Like, you need to have something for metal to reflect, and that's the other thing that's really cool about um, these materials inside of mental ray materials inside of Maya, is that if you come to your MIA materials underscore X passes, if you see right here, you'll see it says presets. If I click on presets, when I click on preset, you'll see it says chrome, copper, frosted glass, rubber, water. These are all materials that have already been made. So if I wanted to come in here and say like frosted glass, choose replace, and now this is frosted glass. So when I go back in here and I render this again, give it a second, you can see that is now frosted glass. If I go back to presets again and I say that I want to make a chrome shader, just come in here to chrome and say replace, and now render. Render. And you see now it's like chrome. It's like completely chromed out. You can do the same thing and do copper, replace, render this, and I got a copper ball. So you've got a couple of shaders that are already pre-built in your MIA materials. They have some presets already in there that are like the most common things that you want to use, like rubber and glass. So it has a lot of dielectric and conductive materials inside of here that are already just kind of set up, which is pretty awesome. You can do physical glass, which is cool, and then render. So, and you can tell this is really physical glass, but if I come back here and look at this through this, you'll see a refraction. So you can actually see the refraction of the world inside of the glass. And if I were to change it to like a thin glass, and let's clone that and hold it, so you can see the type of glass you use will change how the refractions and reflections and everything else happen on, your stuff. Ah. Conductive materials are anything like metals. Um, those are conductive materials. Anything that can conduct electricity. And dielectric materials are things like plastics, fabrics, um, more natural materials. And it's kind of confusing because I know when people hear dielectric, they're like, oh, electric. There's electric in there. So that has to mean like electricity. No, it's actually the opposite way around. Dielectric materials are non conductive, and conductive materials are all the conductive materials like metals. aluminium, steel, copper. Those are all conductive shaders or conductive materials rather. So anything that can conduct electricity, even water would be a conductor, um, because there's metal particles in water, which is what makes it conductive. Because actually, if you have ever been around a saltwater pet shop or some type of aquarium store, they have water in there which they call zero water, which has had all of the impurities stripped out of it. Well, it actually does. You know, when you're looking at a scene, you need to if when you're looking at a scene, you need to understand what materials are going to be conductive materials and what materials are going to be um, dielectric because of how they're going to work when light hits them. Um, it's realistically, if you wanted a real hardcore explanation, Mr. Patrick, looking at a simple article on in a physics book would give you the exact answer. Not that I can't give you the answer, not that I don't want to. It's a it's but it's it can be drawn out. It can be a drawn out process. For the simple fact of something even as simple as this glass, the way this shader is built, it actually looks at index of refraction. So I know that in any physics book you look in, the index of refraction is going to be like 1.55, which is about like 1.6. So 1.6 is the index of refraction of um, glass, whereas diamonds have a refraction of about 2 point, I think it's 2.7, and then air has a refraction of 1.0. Water is like 1.33. So they're real physical properties, which that's kind of the cool thing about it is that if you know the physical properties, if I know that water is 1.33, I can put that into index of refraction. And as far as the refraction of things in my water shader go, they're going to look physically accurate. They're going to look correct. So that's one thing. Like if I come in here and do replace water, you can see water is 1.33. And if I look in here and actually render it, then I'll have a physically accurate water. So it's cool knowing those I tell most of my students that realistically, as a 3D artist, you're part artist and part scientist, because you need to know and understand how those things work together. Um, it's just like right now I'm teaching a class on dynamics and simulation, and if you don't understand the fact that gravity is 98 is well 9.8 Newtonian units square, like a real um, physics book will tell you, then you'll never have gravity in your world. Like our gravity in our world is 9.8 meters square. But knowing those things and knowing like basic trigonometry and those type of things help. Not saying that you have to have them, but excuse me, as you get into more of the simulation and really want to start to understand materials and shaders and things like that, you really do have to make a crossover between science and art. And that's the thing that I really love about working in CG is that I've had a huge love my entire life for science and math, and I just found a way that I could actually make creative, science and math. We kind of joke sometimes is that a CG artist's job is to make science and math sexy, and I think we do that on a normal basis. Like we kind of dress it up so much, and it's like, oh my god, it's beautiful. So, any other questions before I let you, ladies and gentlemen, depart for the evening? welcome. And as I tell you guys every No, you don't have to rezip it. Just moving forward, I'm probably gonna send out a reminder email. But just moving forward, just make sure you guys zip your stuff. It's not a huge, it's not a huge thing. It just makes it a little bit easier for me to be able to grab everything at once and just take it. No worries. And as I say, as always, this session will be live the minute that we stop the session. It will actually be up on live stream, and probably Monday, well, not probably, Monday, I will post a link in the announcements for all classes that you guys can check this out and revisit the things we looked at this week. Other than that, everybody have a great evening, and I will see you next Sunday.